Australia is sleeping on the wrong cars. While everyone chases Monaros, Falcons and Chargers, some of the smartest bargains are still sitting in plain sight. One was laughed at for years, another ended an entire Australian factory, and one forgotten sedan might be far better than its badge suggests. Welcome to the 14 cheap Australian cars that could be secret gold mines. The Toyota Corona Avante quietly rewards people who bother to look. Built in Australia between 1983 and 1987, the Avante was the top-of-the-range Corona with a specification that impressed for the era, and the better examples carried a 2.4-litre fuel-injected engine, making it far more capable than its reputation suggested. Toyota was still fighting for credibility in Australia, and a well-equipped Corona did not carry the same street respect as a Falcon or a Commodore, regardless of how good the actual car was. That perception kept prices in the basement while the cars quietly kept running. What you get today is a locally made Australian sedan with genuine collector credentials, a spec sheet that embarrasses its contemporaries, and prices that still make your wallet do a happy little dance. The people who know, know. Everyone else is still asleep. Tell someone this Pulsar deserves more respect at a car show, then stand back and enjoy the chaos. Built in Melbourne from 1987 to 1991, the Q was the fun version of an already underrated small car, with vibrant colors, a manual gearbox, and a character that felt like Australia's answer to the European hot hatch. It was never going to win a drag race against a Commodore SS, and nobody expected it to. What it offered was a light, nimble, enjoyable drive at a price working Australians could actually afford, assembled here in Melbourne with local pride baked in. Clean examples are rare now because so many were driven into the ground or rusted away. Finding a tidy one is half the fun, and prices are still low enough that you can actually afford to go hunting. And that is only the start, because the deeper we go, the more these cheap old cars start looking like missed opportunities. The Ford ZL Fairlane Ghia arrived in 1985 wearing its boxy suit with total confidence. Long wheelbase, genuine rear seat luxury, road presence smaller cars simply cannot buy, and a Ghia specification that meant buyers got wood grain, velour, and every convenience Ford could fit. It arrived in the shadow of the older Fairlanes, which had already built years of collector goodwill. The ZL got treated like a used-up family car rather than a luxury sedan worth preserving, and prices reflected that dismissal for a very long time. Most people still scroll straight past them. That is precisely why they belong on this list. A clean one is a substantial piece of Australian motoring history, and once tidy examples start disappearing, the people who paid almost nothing for them will feel extremely clever indeed. The Holden VQ Statesman brought the famous name back in 1990, and it made a statement doing it. Big, wide, comfortable, available with a smooth V6 or a proper V8. The VQ offered long-distance Australian cruising ability wrapped in a cabin that took its luxury credentials seriously. It sat in an awkward position for years because the earlier Statesmans attracted collector attention, while the VQ was still just a cheap old car nobody wanted. That left it undervalued, while everything around it appreciated, which is exactly the situation that creates a gold mine for anyone paying attention. What the VQ offers right now is big-body Holden luxury at bargain prices, with mechanical simplicity keeping running costs honest and road presence making everyone in a car park turn and look. The best investment is always the one everyone else is ignoring. That is the trick with cars like these. They looked ordinary for years, then suddenly everyone realizes the good ones have almost disappeared. Mitsubishi built the Verada in Adelaide, a fact that surprises more people than it should. Running from 1991 to 1996, it was the flagship version of a car genuinely more refined than the badge suggested, with a smooth V6 and interior quality punching well above its asking price. The problem was always emotional rather than mechanical. Australians bought luxury with their hearts, and hearts said Holden or Ford without debate. Mitsubishi could not generate that tribal loyalty regardless of how accomplished the engineering was, and the Verada slid quietly into the background. A clean one today feels like a well-kept secret. Prices are still laughably low, the build quality has aged well, and Adelaide-made Australian cars are not something you trip over every day. The badge stopped being a weakness the moment it became a talking point. The Ford EL Fairmont Ghia represents the peak of the traditional Australian family luxury formula before everything got softer and more anonymous. Built from 1996 to 1998, the EL carried the classic Falcon Inline 6 rear-wheel drive, a well-appointed cabin, and old-school Ford character that later models efficiently engineered away. Standard Falcons from this era are everywhere, which is exactly why the Fairmont Ghia is interesting. The Ghia specification added equipment and occasion that lifted the experience above the workhorse versions, yet prices stayed near standard Falcon territory because most buyers never bothered making the distinction. The window is closing on clean EL Fairmont Ghias. The rough ones are being parted out, the average ones are getting scarce, and the tidy survivors are quietly attracting attention that only moves prices in one direction. The time to act is right now. Halfway in, and the pattern is obvious. These were never bad cars, they were just ignored long enough to become interesting. The Toyota Orion Sportivo Z R6 deserves considerably better than the indifference it has received. Assembled in Australia from 2006, the Orion was a proper, locally made Toyota with a 3.5-litre V6, a sporty specification, and the mechanical reliability that makes ownership genuinely enjoyable rather than a recurring financial adventure. Australians were focused on Commodores and Falcons when they wanted local pride and performance, and the Orion never got invited to that conversation. It was too sensible and understated when louder options were sitting right beside it in the showroom, which kept it perpetually undervalued. That neglect created something valuable, a well-sorted Australian-built performance sedan available for money that would barely cover registration on an equivalent Commodore. The TRD version has started moving in price, and when the headline model attracts attention, the supporting cast always follows. The Holden VN Calais from 1988 to 1991 marked the beginning of the wide-body Commodore era that would define how Australians understood large family cars for 2 decades. The Calais was the luxury angle, more refined and better equipped at a time when Holden was making serious quality claims. A lot of VNs had hard lives. They were the family hauler, the interstate runner. The car lent to relatives and returned with questionable modifications and a mysteriously altered ride height. Clean, original examples are rarer than the production numbers suggest, and scarcity is growing. What a good VN Calais offers right now is a proper piece of Australian motoring heritage at prices that feel almost apologetically low. It started the wide-body era, and finding a tidy survivor means getting a genuine slice of history for the price of a dodgy weekend. From here, the list gets much more dangerous, because the top 6 are not just cheap cars, they are pieces of Australian car history that cannot be replaced. Around 2002, Mitsubishi quietly built one of the most genuinely clever Australian-made cars this country produced, and almost nobody noticed. The TJ Magna Sport's all-wheel drive combined a 3.5-litre V6 with a proper all-wheel drive system in a locally assembled family sedan. Engineering ambition most buyers simply walked past. The all-wheel drive system was not a gimmick. It gave the Magna composure in varied conditions that separated it from the mainstream, and the V6 provided enough performance to make the package feel properly sorted. Sophisticated engineering wearing an unfashionable badge is always the recipe for undervaluation. Finding one today is an adventure because so few were built and even fewer maintained properly. A clean one is a legitimate mechanical treasure, and the people who understand what Mitsubishi achieved are paying very sensible money for something truly special. The Holden WH Statesman arrived in 1999 wearing early 2000s Australian luxury with genuine authority. Based on the Commodore platform but stretched and elevated in every meaningful direction, the WH offered long wheelbase presence, a V8 option that made motorways feel personal, and a cabin communicating gravitas without needing to shout. It has stayed cheap longer than it deserves because the market still processes it as an old Commodore rather than an Australian-built luxury car from a tradition that no longer exists. That distinction matters, and the gap between how the market values it and what it represents is where the opportunity sits. Australian long-wheelbase luxury sedans are gone and never coming back. The WH Statesman is one of the last expressions of that ambition, and the prices it commands today will look absolutely baffling to anyone buying one in 10 years. Now we are getting into the cars people will argue about, but while the comments are arguing, someone else is already buying. Everyone knows the BA Falcon XR6 Turbo, which is precisely why the non-turbo version is the smarter conversation. The standard BA XR6 from 2002 to 2005 carries the legendary Barra inline 6, along with genuinely improved styling over the AU and a sports sedan character that felt well resolved from the factory. Turbo versions command a climbing premium and attract attention, making a clean stock example increasingly hard to find. The naturally aspirated one sits just below all that noise with the same engine family, rear-wheel drive character, and prices that make sense for a budget with good taste. The Barra alone is worth the price of entry. Combined with proper XR pedigree, better looks than the model it replaced, and a value proposition the turbo crowd has overlooked, the BA XR6 is exactly the car this list was built to celebrate. The Holden VY Calais from 2002 to 2004 has aged better than most people expected, and the market is only now catching up. Sharp lines that later models softened, a properly luxurious cabin, commanding road presence, and the mechanical robustness Holden's platform spent 2 decades developing. Most people look at a VY and still think old used Holden, which is precisely the mass misunderstanding that creates real opportunity for anyone paying closer attention. The Calais specification lifts it well above the standard Commodore, and clean examples are becoming genuinely difficult to find. There is a recognizable pattern in how Australian cars get appreciated, and the VY Calais is sitting right in the middle. The rough ones are disappearing, and the gap between what you pay today and what gets asked in 5 years closes faster than anyone expects. The Mitsubishi 380 GT has a fascinating story, built around a strong 3.8-liter V6. It was the last vehicle Mitsubishi ever made in this country, and it failed not because it was bad, but because timing was catastrophic and marketing essentially non-existent. A good car beaten by circumstance is the formula for appreciation. The GT was the pick of the 380 range, adding specification and a sportier character to an already capable platform, and drivers who tried one came away more impressed than expected. The buying public was distracted, the dealer network demoralized, and Australian-made Mitsubishi felt like yesterday's news at the worst possible moment. What exists now is the last Australian-made Mitsubishi, representing the end of an entire chapter of industrial history, at prices that remain remarkably honest. That is manufacturing heritage with a V6 and a boot. The Ford AU Falcon XR6 has completed one of the most satisfying reputation reversals in Australian motoring history. When it launched in 1998, the controversial styling made it a target for pub philosophers everywhere, and the jokes were loud, relentless, and genuinely unkind. Time did what it always does to maligned cars. It made the AU interesting. That bold, divisive styling is now exactly why people remember it. The inline 6 stayed dependable, and the XR6 delivered real performance for ordinary Australians. The car everyone laughed at is one of the best driving Falcons ever made. Finding a clean one feels like catching something before the market wakes up. The cult following is real, prices are moving in one direction only, and the people who paid almost nothing for them a decade ago are currently smiling very quietly. So which cheap Aussie car do you think people are still sleeping on? Is there one sitting in a driveway right now that could become a future classic? Type it in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more Australian car stories. Thank you for watching and goodbye.